Hello and welcome back to my channel where I try to have fun with all things beauty while being critical about what I accept into my collection. Today I am reviewing the new Danessa Myricks Freedom Palette. So this is the Freedom Palette Pastel Dream. It's an extension of the holiday palette that came out last year. Lightwork Volume 6 Freedom Palette, which has the same little component in the lid so that you could make it look just like this little extension here. And all of these are made the same, so you can take out the individual pans and move them around, rearrange them, and then you can also break them down into individual 6 pans and then they all magnet together. So you get this lid with a mirror. I left the cover on so I don't blind everybody, but it just pops together and then these stack. This also comes with a leather pouch, so you can put all 3 or 4 of these together. I assume that there's a limit. At some point you probably won't be able to fit the stack, but you can just pop them in there. It magnets shut, and this is a really secure way to travel with your makeup. All of these components are really sturdy, so this entire thing is sturdy. It's hard plastic, so you can't crush it, and everything magnets together, so it stays nice and secure that way too. This is definitely my favorite Lightworks palette, and I have several of them now, but not only do I like this color story the best, but I love this design. Much like everything Danessa Myricks does, it's actually innovative, and it's hard to come by that these days. This was extremely well thought out, and the second I bought it, I was hoping that they would do this exact thing and come out with more palettes in the same format. Because this sold out on Sephora in like a couple of hours, I'm hoping that that means that they will. They will continue with this format. While you could make the argument that these being $8 each, it's a kind of a lot for the mattes. It's a good price for these multi-chromes and this shimmer because these are on par with the best indie brands on the market right now. And it gets extra points for the packaging because I will actually travel with this. I so rarely bring my indie palettes on trips with me because they're too precious and I'm too precious about them. Even though I have 1 or 2 really sturdy Z palettes, they're bulky, they take up a bunch of space, and I just rather not worry about it. I like to keep things simple when I travel, and this is the perfect way to do that. So I'm absolutely stoked about this. I firmly believe that this is the most fun that you're gonna have at Sephora. Other than the old Pat McGrath motherships, which are limited, this is the best in my opinion, and I own a lot of eyeshadow. Before I get into the color story, the last thing I want to mention is how well this was packaged. So this was in a box like this, which is quite thick, and you would think compared to the thickness of the palette that this is a bit overkill, but it's because everything is wrapped in multiple layers of bubble wrap, and I appreciate that because these are really well protected. I know my mail gets thrown around. I know the people at Sephora aren't the best at packing, and yeah, you could replace it if it did come broken, but it's just nice to not have to deal with that. So with that out of the way, I'm going to cut to the swatches so you could get a closer look at this color story in different lighting. So color story is very personal, right? I mean, you either like it or you don't. So as always, I try to keep that a little bit separate from the review. I will talk about a gradient and how I believe a color story can work together if a palette has a good range, if they have good colors that blend together, that kind of thing. But I think most of us at this point know what colors we like and what colors we don't like, and there's no right and wrong when it comes to that. What I personally like about this color story is, even though you can make the argument that there's not a lot of gradient here, there's not a lot of depth. So you're probably going to want to use a companion palette, at least most of the time if you're used to doing your eye makeup like that. So for example, I tried to do that artificially. I tried to build the brown and the pink or teal together to see if it added any depth for my outer corner, but it really didn't. And these are all very similar in tone value. However, if I only have 3 mattes, I would rather have this than try to do a complete look. I'd much rather grab a deeper shade from another even travel size palette than sacrifice the versatility that this has with these three shades. Because the original Freedom palette is all shimmers, it's not like I can grab one from here and make my own little capsule yet, but that could happen in the future. If we get more mattes, maybe we could build a capsule that way, but right now, I have the Natasha Denona Mini Mattes palette, the neutral palette, and that's great. It's very easy to take with me, and I don't need duplicates of those shades to build dimension and use as a companion palette. So I guess what I'm saying is, given the choice, I would have chosen this because I think it allows for a wider range of looks. Today, I decided to use all 6 on my eyes at once, which you could argue is overkill, but I actually think it came out stunning. I was curious because so far I've only used 2 or 4 of these together because I didn't want to run the risk of it looking muddy, and I wanted these duochromes to have a chance to shine on their own. I often feel like with multichromes and duochromes, when there's too many, they're so dimensional on their own that pairing them with almost anything almost takes away from them. So for my first 3 looks, I didn't want to do that. But for today, I figured I might as well go all out and play with the entire palette, and I think it actually worked out really well. I really like the look I did today. So far, I've done a total of 5 different looks with this palette, so I will show that at the end. And I'll also do a close-up with this camera since I almost never do that. I tend to not mess with any of my settings when things are functioning, so I rely mostly on B-roll, but I do think that might be helpful as well, so I will go over all of that at the end. For now, I just wanted to touch on the quality. So if you're not somebody who owns any indie eyeshadow, there might be somewhat of a learning curve here, but if you're willing to use your fingers or maybe like a silicone applicator of some type, I don't think that this is hard to use by any means, and you don't even need a glitter glue because these are emollient, they stick to your lids. It's also worth noting that I never experienced any creasing using these eyeshadows, even when I really built them up like I did for this look. This is at the very end of the day, right before I wash my face, and I don't have any creasing at all, and I have pretty hooded eyes, so I think I'm a pretty good test for that kind of thing, and I had a very good experience using this. The 3 matte shades all seem to be the same exact formula, just in a different color. They all perform very similarly. They're a little bit powdery, but I don't really mind that because sometimes that means that the powders blend together more easily. So if I had to pick between super hard pressed and powdery, I'd pick this, and it's not too bad. I would recommend doing your eye makeup first. I did have some fallout from both the mattes and the shimmers, but it was nothing terrible or out of the ordinary. Generally very happy with this, would love to see more mattes in the same formula. The shimmers, to me, they all perform slightly different from one another, which was very true of the original Freedom palette. So there's a lot going on here, and there's a lot of different formulas. Some of them I found more tricky to work with than others, and I tend not to do too much reading up on the different formulas because to me it doesn't really matter what the description is. At the end of the day, how they perform for me and my experience with them, that's all I really care about. I'll link my review for this in the description box. I went pretty in depth with that because this was such an expensive investment. I wanted people to really be able to see what they were working with, and some of these I just naturally gravitate to more than others. Like this thinner formula, I prefer to this super thick formula down here. I find that more challenging to work with. That's why in general I don't love dept eyeshadows, for example. I've learned to work with them, and they have some thinner formulas too. It's not all this textured and chunky, which I guess, you know, you can smooth out, but it's not always the look I'm going for. So I am happy to say that none of these are super chunky. This pink one in the middle is probably the thickest. I'll try to do a close-up just so you know what I'm talking about. It works fine for me once I smooth it out, but I do need that surface area to smooth it out. The only time that's really a problem is if you want to use it with other things, or like an inner corner highlight, for example, in a small area. It's just not as easygoing as a formula like this champagne shimmer. That is just very smooth to begin with. This purple multichrome is similar to the pink, but it is a little bit thinner, so it's just a hair easier to work with, and both of these are incredibly incredibly impactful. So not all multi-chromes are created equal. I've definitely worked with some where you can barely see the shift at all. Like you need a huge curved surface and a flashlight to even know that you're using a multi-chrome. These are not like that. You can see them quite easily, and you don't even have to use it across your entire eyelid to see the shift. So I'm very impressed with that. I'm a big fan of the colors chosen because even though, like, a lot of people argued that a lot of these were sort of played out multi and duochromes, there weren't a ton of unique shifts here. I think this offers something at least a little bit more unique. They're not crazy unique. They're not unheard of. Obviously, like, I don't even know if you could find any color combination these days in multichromes that haven't been done before, but these are nice ones. They're ones that you actually want on your eyes. That's the other thing. I've seen duochromes and multichromes made for the sake of being different, and sometimes it's just not flattering. So I feel like these are a good choice of unique while still being pretty. And finally, this shimmer in the corner. I think some amount of people might complain that this end of the palette is boring, but I'm thrilled. I actually feel like I'm a collector of champagne shimmers at this point. It's my favorite shimmer, period. I have a lot of competing shades, yet somehow this one stands out, and it's definitely my new favorite champagne shimmer. And I'll pop up a look real quick to sort of show you what I mean. It has that wet look effect, and in certain angles it actually can disappear completely. So it's not a topper per se, but it does play off the light. So that's kind of what gives it that extra ethereal property, almost like it's coming from your actual eyelids, like you're literally glowing from within because it just looks like it's coming out of your skin. That's a cool effect. That's really beautiful. If I were to pick any neutral on the planet, this would have been it. So final thoughts. From a personal standpoint, this is an absolute home run. It's fun while still being versatile, and I'm excited to reach for it. I'm genuinely excited. Even though it's only 6 shades, I've been able to do a lot with this only using this palette. So far, none of my looks have anything else mixed in other than an eye primer. So to close this video out, I will show the 5 eye looks that I have so far. I will be posting more on Instagram, and I always post there first when I get new palettes, so definitely follow me over there if you're interested in that. And I'm over here covered in swatches. I'm like a cat. I'm mesmerized by looking at my own hand in the light over here. So needless to say, I am thrilled with this. It is a little bit steep of a price point, but if you really look at what you're getting, I personally think it's worth it. And for me, this has more longevity than some of the brand new 15 pan palettes that I buy for $50 that sit around and collect dust. I think that this has the longevity that those don't, and for that reason alone, I would pay full price, but I do believe you can get this for 10 or 15% off on the Danessa Myricks website. So just because it sold out on Sephora, that doesn't mean anything. I think you do need to be a new email subscriber, but I did that for this palette last fall, and I think I actually got 15% off just for using a new email address. In editing, I've realized that I neglected to mention who I don't think this palette is good for. I don't think this palette is good for people who have a large indie collection and have singles that are very similar to these shifts. I think you would save a lot of money just picking up the colors in this palette that you like and buying them individually from an indie brand. Like if you like 2 of the shimmers, just buying those 2 shimmers, even if they're $10 a piece, is still a lot cheaper than the whole palette. Because you can find these in other places, like I would check Clionadh Cosmetics, for example. They have a ton of different varieties. This isn't a must-have because it is so unique. I think this is more worth it for somebody who feels the way I do and likes the convenience of the packaging. Just like when I reviewed the big palette, the Big Freedom palette, I talked about the fact that that had value for me. It wasn't just the shadows itself. There was value in the packaging for me, and not everyone is going to feel that way. So I think that comes down to individual preferences, and I know a lot of other people would be better off getting the individual shades instead. Now I'll do sort of a montage of the different looks that I've done, and I will finish with a play-by-play of me doing this eye look today. In that video, I actually show my technique fatigue of dealing with fallout. So I just take any moisturizer. The one I showed is completely random. Any moisturizer, and I put it under my eyes and then I wipe it away. And it's a really simple way to clean up my face. Obviously, if you have dry skin, if you have oily skin, water and a washcloth will probably do the trick, but there's a little tip for dry skin. I also show the blush that's on my face today, and you can get a better look at it. This is the Danessa Myricks Yummy Skin Rose and Brunch. This has the Upsolite. You know, that's not an ingredient that I tend to gravitate towards, but this does not dry my skin out, and it is great for longevity. Like, these blushes have staying power, so if you're somebody that struggles with that, I highly recommend looking into these. I toyed with the idea of doing a full face of Danessa Myricks, but I backed out because even though I like the skin tint I have from her, I don't love it. And lately I've been really struggling with my skin, and it kind of destroys my confidence. So I feel like doing this review today, if I wasn't feeling good about how my face looked, it just would have made it more challenging than what it's worth. So those, I guess, are my 2 cents on the skin tint. It's nice, but it's very light coverage, so it's not really what I go for on a daily basis. I mostly go to Danessa Myricks for eye products just because I have more mature dry skin, but I do think the brand is still out there innovating. When every other brand at Sephora is going safe, Pat McGrath, Danessa keeps it interesting, and I love her so much for that. I am so grateful that they're still out there doing that, even though they're in Sephora and Ulta. I think they're phenomenal, but enough about that. Here are my eye looks. All right, as promised, I'm going to do a quick zoom in and then an outro. It feels very summery and fun, and I definitely don't think it's too much. So I'm thrilled with this little palette. And next up, I will be reviewing the new Nomad Route 66 palette that I got a few days ago. I'm also picking up the new Singe Beauty palette when it drops on May 16th. So I'm really excited about that as well. Not that I'm relying on beautiful eyeshadow to foster a will to live in this country right now. I also have dogs, and it helps. And then a Sephora haul. So there's a bunch of things coming up. Thank you so much for being here with me. I hope you're having a beautiful day or night wherever you are. Don't forget to take care of yourself. I love you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.